There's this narrative that is told to all of us. You have to go to school, you have to get good grades, you have to go to a good college, you have to do as you're told. You don't have to do shit. You can have an amazing life without doing any of those things.
Just a few years ago, the man you're about to meet was a drug addict on Skid Row. Now he's a successful businessman hobnobbing with celebrities.
Meet Khalil Rafati.
When I was getting high, I could rationalize anything, but I remember selling my body for drugs and thinking, I'm not hurting anybody. I'm not like those guys that are fucking robbing and harming people. I was a mental defect in full flight from reality. I was completely fucking insane.
When did you consciously say to yourself, I am the creator of the world that I live in?
I didn't believe that God gave a shit about me. And so I began to rewrite that part of my story as well.
I don't know if many are as open or as vulnerable or as honest as you are in that pursuit.
When I'm faced with monumental adversity, because I don't have the skill set or the intelligence to figure it out, I just fucking run through it. That's my fucking talent.
What is something you can give someone listening right now to increase their own consciousness?
I mean, that's an easy one. Just ask.
Khalil,
Yes, sir.
welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Dude, I want to start off with a quote to get right into it from you that can really give people a sense for the life you've lived.
Okay.
How does that sound?
That sounds great. I'm nervous now. What's the quote?
If a fucking moron like me can come from such a hopeless state of despair, such a horrific childhood with so much neglect and so much pain and so much abuse, and then fuck up my entire life for the next 3 decades, and then very late in life, 33 years old was the last time I drank or got high. 35 years old was when I had my spiritual awakening in the 12-step program. 37 years old was when I opened my first business. 41 years old was when I opened up SunLife Organics. 45 years old was when I wrote my first book. 49 years old was when I wrote my second book, opened up a yoga studio. And if a fucking moron like me can do this, what I'm talking about, then anybody can do anything. Anybody can do whatever the fuck they want. That's my message to the world.
Wow, that's amazing. When did I say that?
You said that on Josh Peck's podcast in 2021 in a state of, you had just finished talking to him, and it was so pure and so real and so honest and so true that it really hit me. And I was like, I really need to present this quote to Khalil to really give someone listening a sense for what's going on with your life, but also to reflect that back to you.
Yeah.
How does that sound today?
I mean, it's awesome because as you were saying it, I knew they were my words, but I'm like, wait, this wasn't in my book. Was this an Instagram post? That is, wow. That is my message we could hit stop now. And if people would literally look at that and then look at my life and kind of, go through my Instagram and see the different things that I've been up to, whether it's in the past 6 weeks or the past 6 months or the past 6 years. I mean, my life is so beyond amazing, mind-blowing, aha moments constantly, moments of profound gratitude, deep meaning, but always with this kind of internal giggle that I remember my whole life. I mean, I was just talking about this earlier today with Brad, this kid that works for me. I remember my whole life, I always got picked either second to last or last whenever the kids were doing the sports in grade school. And talk about a way to really fuck someone up and really scar someone and make them feel like a piece of shit, right? Is to have a group of your peers do this pecking order. And I believe in a a meritocracy based society. I believe in all that, but man, I don't wish that pain on anyone. And having weird foreigner parents, when I say my dad was Middle Eastern, my dad wasn't just Middle Eastern. My dad was Palestinian, which when I was a little kid, they were the most hated race of people on the planet. I mean, they were just straight up fucking terrorists, and the constant joking and brutal names that kids called me. And my mom was from Poland, and you're way too young to remember this, but if anybody's in their late 40s or 50s, they'll remember that all throughout the 70s, making fun of Polish people, it goes in waves, right? I think like a couple years ago, it was really in to make fun of Asian people, and somehow that was okay, but you couldn't make fun of black people, or you couldn't make fun of Mexican people. And I think before Asian people, it was Mexican people, and you could make fun of them. And before that, it was Italians. When I was a kid, making fun of Polish people was like a big thing because there was a television show called All in the Family, and there was this character named Archie Bunker, and his brother or his son-in-law was Polish. And so he would constantly like, you Polacks are so stupid. And so that sort of like, I guess, gave people permission to brutally make fun of Polish people. So I always felt stupid. I always felt less than. I always felt like I didn't measure up. I didn't have skills. I didn't have talent. And and then you throw in like a really dysfunctional, horrific childhood on top of that with all kinds of epigenetic imprinting and violence and incest and all of the horrible shit that I went through. You have somebody, by the time they're hitting their early teens, mid-teens, the only thing I could do was act out and become a juvenile delinquent and shoplift and drinking and drugs and all that stuff that just, I don't know, I really didn't have another choice. So now as I live my life, and obviously I'm much, much older now, but now as I live my life, whether I'm in the south of France and I'm at this like mythical Hotel du Cap Eden Rock, or I'm in Sardinia, which is a blue zone, which I didn't even know there like was a place like that before. I was just there like a month ago. Or London for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and walking up and down every single street is like a different part of history, and just, so full of excitement and culture. Each time I'm doing that, there's this tickly feeling in my stomach like, you know what? I did belong, and I do have value, and I am capable, and I deserve a good life.
I think that is the most remarkable realization of all, that you got to that place of saying, wow, like, I am worthy of having these experiences, when for so long, and you were born basically to have the opposite thought.
Mm-hmm.
And you lived experiences that gave yourself the opposite realization. I'm not worthy and not only am I not worthy, I'm bad, and I'm
dirty.
I'm the worst. Like, is the story that was repeating in your head over and over and over again.
Yes, it was more than a mantra. It was who I was. I just really always felt like a piece of shit. I always knew that everybody that I got close to was either going to die or move away. When I started having, like romantic relationships with girls as a young kid and into my teens and 20s, I always knew they were going to leave because they were going to eventually find out who I was and that I was a piece of shit and I was a loser. And that was my MO, my modus operandi. That was, I'm a piece of shit, I'm bad, I suck, and my life is painful. But I do have to be honest and tell you that it's also a pretty great excuse if you want to cheat, if you want to act out, if you want to lie, if you want to live without a moral compass and act like a piece of shit. You can justify it by using those sad stories. But when you get older, you come to the realization, hopefully others come to the realization that it's just a story. It's just a story. And I'm the author of that story. So at any moment, I can choose to start writing a different story. And, people are wowed by, oh my God, you look at this big brand you've built and you're operating in 5 different states and you have over 400 employees. And, what was your business plan like? There was no business plan. Well, what did you go to school for? I dropped out of high school. I didn't go to school for business. Oh, well, what's your culinary background? How did you create, these amazing recipes that every supermodel and rock star and politician and billionaire, like they're all seen walking around carrying your stuff. What's your culinary background? I don't have one. My culinary background, I'm mixed cocaine and heroin together and shot it into my veins, and every single time taking my own life into my own hands and shooting to death's door. My point in saying all that, maybe there was a little bit of humble bragging in there, but my point in saying all that is like, there's this belief that you have to come from a good family. You have to be educated. You have to have a bunch of skills. You need to go to Stanford. You need to know how to do a PowerPoint presentation, which I don't know how to do. Listen, I was in Morgan Stanley. One of the top people at Morgan Stanley was just like, dude, how have you not raised money before? Like, you need to raise money and open up 100 of these across the country. Interesting idea. I ultimately didn't end up doing it, but I'm sitting with all these suits, and I'm in sweatpants and a t-shirt because that's all I ever wear. I don't own a suit. I don't have a tie. I don't own a tie. I don't they were all in these like really fancy suits. It was in Century City. And they were trying to get like the essence of the brand. Like, how can they present this brand to these big, the L. Cattertons and the Danny Meyers and these people, these so-called venture capitalists, other people call them vulture capitalists. And one of the guys, super cool guy, but he was like, what's the, what did he say? What's your profit? What's your gross profit? And what's your, I'm going to fuck this up now. He asked me sales gross or net, or profits gross or net, or something like that. And I said, I don't know. And he goes, you don't know what your sales are? I'm like, yeah, I know what the sales are. And he's like, well, what's the gross and what's the net? I think I'm saying this right. And I said, I don't know. And he goes, what do you mean you don't know? And I said, I don't know what that means. He goes, you don't know what that means? You're doing $17 million a year in sales and you don't know the difference between gross and net? And I said, no. And they all started laughing because they thought I was fucking with him. And then they quickly realized, like, I didn't know. I still don't know. And I'm probably telling the story completely backwards. Or like they say things like, what's your EBITDA? I hear that all the time. I don't fucking know. I don't know what EBITDA is. First of all, I hate that word. It sounds like creepy. What's your EBITDA? Well, I had an EBITDA for a while, but I put a little cream on it, and eventually it went back down. I thought I was going to have to get it clipped off. There's this narrative that is told to all of us that you have to go to school, you have to get good grades, you have to go to a good college, you have to do as you're told, you have to, toe the line and follow directions and blah. You don't have to do shit. You don't have to do shit. Now, an amazing life is not going to be presented to you just because you decide not to do shit, but you can have an amazing life without doing any of those things. And yeah, that quote is awesome. I totally forgot. That's the comic guy, right? Josh Peck?
He was Drake and Josh. Was like a TV show.
Oh. Okay. Drake as in the rapper?
This is so funny. No, it was a cartoon show. Like it was on. It wasn't a cartoon, but it was on Nickelodeon.
Okay. I remember doing the podcast. I remember the conversation we had before he hit record, and I remember the conversation we had after he hit record. He is one of the funniest human beings ever. That's why I thought he was a comic. But what a sweet guy.
Yeah.
What a sweet guy.
Yeah.
I didn't know anyone had ever listened to that.
Yeah, man. One thing that I'm so curious about is the story. Like you said you started telling yourself a new story. Mm-hmm. When was that? Like, when did you consciously say to yourself, I am the creator of the world that I live in?
That was piecemeal. That started out, I remember sitting in rehab, and everybody kept saying, like, yeah, man, I'm never going to get high again. I'm never going to get high. And I remember thinking, like, you're full of shit. Like, of course you're going to get high again. Like, I want to get high right now. And I remember, like, I shouldn't say everybody, but like 90% of everybody was just like, yeah, man, I'm fucking done, putting the plug in the jug or like whatever. And I just remember thinking, like, these guys are full of shit. Like, I want to get high. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get high. Like, I need to put some weight back on. I need to get the law off my back. I need to get some money going and a roof over my head. But I'm for sure going to get high again. And I remember sitting in this group, and this older guy was teaching the group, and he said, you're nothing but a bunch of mental defects in full flight from reality. And I was like, fuck you. And he's like, excuse me? I'm like, nothing. He's like, what'd you just say? I'm like, nothing. I don't like you calling me that. And he goes, well, that's what you are. And I said, says who? And he says the whatever book of the 12-step program that we were in. You're not supposed to talk about it on press, radio, or film, so I'm trying to be respectful. But he ended up reading the passage out of this book, and the way that he explained it, he's like, you're a mental defect in full flight from reality. And man, I remember going back to my room, and I'm like, am I mental? I'm a mental defect? Then I started thinking about like deciding that I should shoot crack, and that I heard from this guy on the street that if you mix crack with lemon juice, that because you can't shoot crack because it's oily, so you have to like break it down with lemon juice or vinegar. And I remember like going and like stealing lemons out of somebody's yard and like putting it and then shooting lemon juice and crack. It worked. I'm not, please, my God, if anyone's listening to this, don't ever do that. But the fact that I did that, the fact that I was willing to just pick up a dirty needle off the street and hope that it wasn't infected with AIDS or hepatitis C, the fact that I would shoot lemon juice and crack, the fact that I would, any of the things, I started thinking about it. Like when I was getting high, I could rationalize anything, but like I remember like selling my body for drugs and thinking, well, I'm not hurting anybody. I'm not like those guys that are fucking robbing and harming people. I'm just like letting some dude jack off on me, or like, giving a guy a hand job for like a 20 rock. Like, I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. As I sit here with you today with that 20 years behind me, like, yeah, I was a mental defect in full flight from reality. I was completely fucking insane. So that was the sort of the beginning, the leveling field of me going, wow, man, you're completely full of shit. And you don't know what the fuck you're doing. Because if you did, you wouldn't be in this shitty rehab with fucking sores all over your face and abscesses all over your arms and ringworm and fucking scabies. Like, that was the beginning of like conceding to my innermost self that I was in fact an alcoholic and a drug addict, and that my life had become unmanageable. I got really honest with myself, and then I just thought, like, you know what? I'm gonna listen to Bob Forrest. Bob Forrest was a counselor at the treatment center that I was at. He later became famous, but at the time he was still intentionally a nobody. He was like, you know what? Don't worry about the steps. Don't worry about, like, just stay clean and sober for 1 year. And at the end of 1 year, if you don't like your life a lot better, I'll buy you your first bag of dope.
Wow.
I'm like, all right, cool. You're on. And I'm like, but one more caveat. He's like, what? I'm like, if I stay sober for a year, I want to go to the Red Hot Chili Peppers concert. And he's like, so then go. I'm like, aren't you friends with those guys? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, so I don't want to just go. I want to like go backstage and like, whatever. And he was like, done, no problem.
Wow.
Yeah. 8.5 months clean and sober. He invited me to, they're redoing it now because they have the SoFi Stadium, but right across from the SoFi Stadium is the Forum, the Great Western Forum. And he invited me to that show, and I saw them play backstage. And I decided that I was going to then experiment with this sobriety stuff. Now, the great pivotal moment that I think you're looking for is when my mom got sick. My mom got sick at 8.5 months. I couldn't help her. I couldn't go visit her. I didn't have any money to send her. And that was another like, oh, wow, I'm a real piece of shit. I'm 34 years old, and my mom I thought she was dying of cancer. She didn't die of cancer, thank God. And I went home that night, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried. And I was punching myself in my legs, which is some coping mechanism that I did. I would sometimes pinch myself, sometimes punch myself. But I was punching myself in my legs, and I was crying and sobbing. And I had been watching The Secret by Rhonda Byrne, the documentary. And I was like, never again, never again, never again, never again. I'm never going to feel like this again. I'm never going to fucking feel like this again. I felt like such a low-life piece of shit that I couldn't help my mom. I couldn't even send her, money. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even afford to go visit her.
And she had left you those $5 when you were growing up.
She did a lot more than that. She wasn't a great mom, but in the end, when I was drinking and using, she was borrowing money on her credit card because she was scared I was going to kill myself, and that was my threat to her, because I knew that if I threatened to kill myself, that she would go charge money on her credit cards to Western Union me. I don't even know if you guys have Western Union anymore, but she would Western Union me money from her credit card, and she drove herself severely into debt. And my mom was already living at the right below the level of poverty as it was. So I made a vow 8.5 months in that I was never going to feel like that again, and that I was going to be rich, that I was going to be successful, and that I was going to be able to take care of myself and take care of my mom, and God willing, if I ever found someone that wanted to date me again, or maybe someday marry me, whatever, a significant other, I was going to be able to take care of them, and I was going to be rich, and I was going to be successful. So I decided at that point that I was going to rewrite the story, and I got up the next morning and literally just went from place to place looking for work, took any work I could get, and started to rewrite the story. And Bob Proctor, Think and Grow Rich, The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles, Psycho-Cybernetics, As a Man Thinketh. I just started putting that stuff into my head, and now I'm old. Now I know whatever you put in is whatever you're going to get out. But I didn't know back then, if you idolize Jim Morrison and Sid Vicious and read Diary of a Dope Fiend and watch Trainspotting over and over again, and idolize and worship all these fucking moron drug addict rock stars that died way too soon, that's what I was going to get out. So when I instead started reading spiritual scriptures, and I started listening to Emmett Fox, who's a Christian philosopher, and I started really getting into Around the Year with Emmett Fox, which was a daily affirmation book, which would take a quote from the Bible or a passage from the Bible, and then he would sort of break it down for you. And then I got another book, which was his interpretation of Sermon on the Mount. I got another book, which was his interpretation of the Lord's Prayer, because I fucking hated religion. And I believed there was a God, but I didn't believe that God gave a shit about me. And so I began to rewrite that part of my story as well.
There's so much there. And how long did it take for you to realize the vision that you had set out of, I'm going to be rich, I'm going to be successful, I'm going to be able to take care of my mother? How long until that actually came, you could feel that in your own life?
So I started washing dogs at Sherman's place. I was walking Lou Gossett Jr.'s dogs, and he gave me $500 a week. Eventually I got a job at the Malibu Ranch, which was $10 an hour. He paid me in cash. I think the what is that? The limitations, the statute of limitations. Yeah.
We won't tell anyone.
I very quickly had and then I was walking dogs for Pietra, doing errands for Cindy Landon. Very quickly, I all of a sudden had more work than I even knew how to manage it. Or I found myself many times literally working 20-hour stretches. Now, part of that time would be the overnight guy at the rehab that I was working at, and I will be honest and say that I definitely
You dozed off.
I dozed off quite a bit. Most of the clients were severely medicated, because that's what they do in high-end treatment centers. They just medicate the shit out of everybody, and most people were on sleep meds. So very quickly I had 4 to 6 jobs at any given time, and money began to accumulate. And just like violence begets violence, prosperity begets prosperity. So I had a sponsee, and he was making fun of me for wearing True Religion jeans. I'm really dating myself right now. But he was like, dude, don't you live at your sponsor's house? I'm like, yeah. He's like, you don't have an apartment. I'm like, no. But I'm fucking sober, whatever. It was and he goes, no. I get it. I appreciate your help, but you're broke. Why are you wearing $300 jeans? And I'm like, because I want to get laid. I want to fucking look cool. I want to not feel like a piece of shit. Like, what's your problem with my jeans? And he said, you want to look cool? You want to get laid? You want to feel good about yourself? Start accumulating some wealth. And I'm like, I've got some money saved up. He's like, no, real wealth. And I'm like, meaning what? And he's like, he asked me when my next paycheck was. I told him, and he said, I'm going to pick you up and I'm going to take you to California Numismatics Metals and I'm going to show you what real wealth accumulation is about. And he drove me to this numismatics, which is like the something of precious metals, the collection of precious metals, the sales of precious metals. I don't know. Somebody out there can Google that. But he went and he had them show me a Lady Fortuna 10-ounce bar, which was like one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. And then he said, do you guys have any Krugerrand? And the guy said, yeah. And he's like, give him one. I want him to hold it in his hand because the bar was sealed. It was hermetically sealed. But the Krugerrand was real 24 pure gold, like sitting in my hand. And he's like, close your hand, feel that. And I'm like, whoa. He goes, yeah, that's not fiat money. That's not bullshit paper backed by nothing. That's real wealth that's been used as a storage of wealth for thousands and thousands of years. It's biblical. He goes, you need to start buying that with every paycheck. And that began my journey in investing. And that was another part of my story, that I was going to get a safety deposit box and I was not going to count it until I filled the whole thing up, which I didn't stay true completely to my promise to myself, because there was definitely some times when I was feeling pretty exhausted and tired, and I would go to the bank and I would take it out and I would take it all out on the thing and I would count it up. And every time I did it, it just kept growing. So abundance and prosperity begets abundance and prosperity. And so I began to believe that I could create abundance and wealth and prosperity. And it didn't seem like there was any limit to it. I didn't know how I was going to, take the next leg up, but I did.
It's also funny how, like, your level of what you believe wealth and prosperity to look like changes as you grow.
For sure.
I mean, at one point, you had $5,000 to your name, and you tell a homeless man, I have more money than I know what to do with.
Remember it like it was yesterday, and it was an aha moment. It was a goosebumps moment. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I became in that moment the narrative inside my head of that I lived in a scarcity environment. It shifted like almost completely. I had a paradigm shift that I now existed in an environment, in a world of abundance, that there was enough for all of us. I import matcha and I sell it. It's one of my side hustles, right? If you told me without knowing that you want to import matcha, or that you do import matcha, the old me would have been like, oh, fuck, you don't tell him, or like you don't encourage him, or you should try to discourage him and like whatever, because there's not enough to go around. There's enough for all of us. There's enough for all of us. If I told you that I wanted to start a podcast, my guess is you'd probably get excited for me and you'd probably try to help me and whatever, because you live in an abundance and prosperity environment. Most people don't. Most people are taught by their parents that we can't afford that, son. We could never afford that. Or, hey, money doesn't grow on trees. It does. It does. Sometimes in the form of oranges, sometimes in the form of cannabis, sometimes in the form of timber, lumber, like whatever. Money absolutely grows on trees, and it grows in many, many other areas. It grows in this digital age as you capture eyeballs. That's the new gold rush, brother. You are at the forefront of the new gold rush. However you can capture someone's attention and hold that attention, that is what the people were doing at the turn of the century with gold. I mean, with steel and with oil and all that stuff. So money grows on trees. Your parents were wrong. You can afford that. Stop telling yourself that you can't afford it. And if you need to say, I can't afford that, just throw yet at the end of it. That's all. Just shift it a little bit. But trust me, sooner or later, you'll catch yourself saying stuff like that, and you'll realize like, oh, fuck, I'm literally telling the universe to stop giving me abundance when I say things like, I can't afford that. I can't afford that. I could never afford that. Yeah.
Not good.
Rewrite the story.
One thing you mentioned there about how we're living in the the gold rush of attention. Attention's the new commodity. And one thing from listening to you on so many previous podcasts to prepare for this one, I noticed was how good you actually are at capturing attention, and how good you are at taking a story, and I've noticed it here. It's like you can take a random thing that happened to you, put somebody else in that moment, and really give them the full picture. So you're really good at capturing attention. You've done it with your book in the written form, and I know you use Tucker Max's Book in a Box to make that happen. And you're a very eloquent speaker who can captivate a room and captivate a podcast audience.
Thank you.
How do you think you could go about teaching that skill to more people?
Oh, God, that's so simple. Especially if you have any type of addictions, start going to 12-step meetings, because they make you get up in front of a room of strangers and tell your story. And if you're anything like me, or 100% of the other people that start going to those meetings, you're going to get up there and you're going to try to bullshit. You're going to get up there and you're going to try to exaggerate or brag or come across with false bravado. And you very quickly are going to get destroyed. People in those meetings will call bullshit. And people in those meetings will let you know with their very pointed and weaponized questions that they don't believe a fucking thing you're saying. So getting up and intentionally speaking in front of people, go do an open mic night and read some of your poetry, you know? And if you start getting booed, or you start seeing people talking and not paying attention to you, welcome that. Welcome it, because that should teach you that you're missing the mark and you need to try harder and you need to hone your skills, right? So my communication skills were greatly developed on the streets, because if you couldn't communicate quickly and decisively and directly, you'd get the shit beat out of you, you'd get robbed or ripped off, or you'd die. So my communication skills I learned on the streets in 12-step rooms, but I'll tell you the best thing you can do if you want to become a good communicator, and 90% of the amount of money that you are going to ultimately earn, 90% of it is intrinsically related to how well you communicate. You want to communicate really, really well? Go to an acting class. Find an acting class. Doesn't even need to be a good one. It can be a horrible acting class. It can be a free one, which is I went to. I don't know if Sherman's Moms was free or they just felt fucking sorry for me and they let me go for free. But early on, the lady that I was washing dogs for told me that I should go to her mom's acting class. And her mom was this old, kind of crusty, bitter at times, lovely, amazing woman, but had no problem just completely ripping you apart in front of a group of people. They would film us like this, and then at the next class, we would spend the entire class watching the videos of all of us trying to act out these different parts. And then she would want the room to criticize you. And holy fucking shit. I mean, it felt like being under a shower with the heat turned all the way it could possibly go. It felt like scalding hot water was burning the shit out of my skin when people would say, like, you keep saying you shouldn't say so much, or like, you know, how come you can't stand still, and you seem really uncomfortable with your hands, you look like you never know where you should put your dude. It was fucking brutal. And it was guys and gals in that class, and I watched myself and I watched what was wrong with me, and I had other people telling me what was wrong with me in the way that I was communicating, because acting is communicating. By the way, if you were really, really good at pretending to be somebody else 150 years ago, they'd put you in a fucking loony bin. Today, they give you $20 million a picture, and you get to go on Instagram and pontificate and virtue signal and tell the rest of us fucking plebeians how we should live our lives, and we shouldn't be allowed to have a gun, and, you know, we should vote this way, and, you know, like, whatever, what kind of car we should drive. Like, it's amazing to me when I see these people who I know, many of them really well, people who live in glass houses should not throw stones. If you're going to do a film that is one of the most provocative films dealing with drugs and gun violence, if you're going to star in that film and you're going to get paid $20 million fucking dollars, please don't go on Instagram and start talking about how we need to get rid of guns and assault rifles should be banned. Because the movie that you starred in did more to promote gun violence and romanticize drug dealing and gang violence than any movie that I've seen since Scarface. I remember being an 11-year-old kid and watching Scarface with Al Pacino and going, I want a girl like Michelle Pfeiffer, and I want to have a Porsche, and, you know, I should be a drug dealer when I get older. I was 47 years old when I was watching this particular movie that this guy that I know starred in, and I got a tickly feeling in my stomach. I was like, damn, I kind of miss those days of like buying a couple thousand hits of ecstasy for, you know, $4 a pill and selling them for, you know, $20 a pill and making that fast money and being able to go out and spend money with complete abandonment. Luckily, the feeling subsided, but what if I was 16 and I was watching that movie? So, anyway, go to acting class. Sorry, I went off on a tangent
No,
there.
it's so good.
Go to an acting class and get torn apart. Go to a 12-step meeting and get torn apart. Or if you don't have the guts to do that, just simply take a camera like that and get up and start reading monologues or dialogues or whatever the fuck they're called. Start reading them in front of the camera, record yourself, and then hit stop and then watch it, or maybe have some friends that are brutally honest with you watch it and critique you, and you'll see you'll see right away where you're not communicating well, and you'll get much, much better.
One of the things that seems like a common in your story is that you got triggered or got angry so many times from people calling you out, and then you were able to make a change. So somebody would be like, all right, like, why are you wearing those jeans? Or someone would be like, dude, you're a terrible actor. Or someone, you know, and from that, you actually got better. How come that happened? How come you got better, whereas a lot of people sometimes get angry but live in that person's wrong? You took responsibility.
Because we are inherently full of shit. We're all full of shit. Perry Farrell in one of the Jane's Addiction songs said, everyone is so full of shit. We rationalize, minimalize, and justify our actions with such an amazing ability. We are delusional, putting pictures of ourselves on so-called social media, and with the right lighting and the right angle and the right, you know, my arms like that, and oh, the horseshoe is showing and whatever. And then, you know, we go and get in our car and our gut is spilling over our shorts, and, you know, we feel like a piece of shit. So it's this back and forth of like fooling ourselves into believing that we are something that we're not. And I am just as guilty of it as anybody. It takes great strength and humility and good character to really get to know yourself, to really look at yourself and examine yourself. And I have a lot of criticism of 12-step programs, but I will tell you, it was a super humbling experience to be reparented by the 12 steps, and to have to go and face people that I had harmed, and to have to make amends to people. And the most powerful moments were when I was encouraged to make amends to people that had harmed me. Like, they don't really say it specifically like that, but like, did you have any part in, you know, your resentment against your swim coach for, you know, fucking molesting you however many years ago? Did you have any part in it? Like, fuck no. You know? No, you had no part. No. You have no part at all in that resentment. Nope. Fuck no. That fucking guy, if I saw him today, I'd beat the shit out, you know, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Are you hanging on to that resentment? Oh. Yeah, I guess. You seem pretty wound up right now, so seems like maybe you're hanging on to that resentment, you know? And my original sponsor made me go through this exercise, which took a long time, but I had to not develop empathy for this person, because I don't have empathy for this person. But I do have sympathy. I do have sympathy. He made me picture him. He's like, how old is he now? I'm like, I don't fucking know. And I was like, 34 when I was doing these steps. And the guy was a lot older than me. So he was like in his 70s. And he's like, can you picture him now? Can you picture what kind of life he's probably having? Can you imagine how he walks around knowing that shit is in his head? And like my old sponsor was a master, and he got me to a place where I really felt fucking sorry for this guy. And he's like, do you really want to let this guy rent space in your head for free 40 years later? Or whatever it was, 30, something years. And I was like, no. And he's like, so you have a big part in this. Like, you need to let it go. You don't need to like forgive him in this moment, but maybe at some point in your life you will. But you need to let this go because this is negatively affecting your life. And yeah, it was heavy. It was powerful. So I learned to the best of my ability not to be completely full of shit. Now look, there are still times when there's this one picture of me, I don't know where it is on my Instagram, but there's one picture of me where I'm sitting on my friend's jet and I'm in my pajamas. It was one of my favorite pictures of me because I had my pajamas on. I was on a private jet that definitely was not mine, nor did I pay any money to be on that jet. But I got fucking thousands of likes when I put this picture up because it wasn't just like a private jet. It was like a giant, it was bigger than a Global Express. And I thought I was so fucking cool. This is like 6-7 years ago when I posted it. I may have actually deleted it. But years later, I remember looking at that picture and reading the caption, and it was like, dude, your back was out in that picture. The reason you're sitting Indian style is because you couldn't sit normal. I was in severe stabbing pain, and I was also fighting with the person who I was with, whose jet it was. And I ended up leaving the vacation early and flying back commercially. And I'm not looking for sympathy here whatsoever. I'm a fucking douchebag for even talking about this. But the point is this. I was as miserable, if not more miserable, than just about any other time in my life when I was posting that picture. But I didn't say that. I just put some inspirational quote to try to justify my humble bragging and my fucking desperate, insecure need to crowdsource my self-esteem through so-called social media.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really sad. I mean, I'll never forget a situation where I got into someone's car, like a really nice car, and I don't know anything about cars. I get into his car. I say, like, oh, this is a nice car. And my buddy, 30 minutes later, turns to me and he's like, dude, you don't care about this car. Like, in a good way. Like, you're not with me for this car. 99 times out of 100, people come into this car and they're taking pictures of it, and they just really want to be around me because of this car. You're not like that. And I'm like, yeah, because that's not you.
Yeah.
You are not the private jet.
Yeah.
You own the private jet. It doesn't even matter. That's not you.
Yeah.
You're not the car. You're not the businesses you've built.
Yeah.
You're not any of that shit.
Yeah.
You're an incredible human being for increasing your own consciousness.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I definitely can be a shallow fucking douchebag, though, on a regular basis. And I don't know. I don't even want to say like I'm embarrassed of those actions. I think it's just part of the human condition. Like, listen, we were hunters and gatherers.
It's not the human condition. Like, we can give ourselves the excuses that we want.
Yeah.
But we don't have to act like that.
We don't. You're right. It's not the human condition. It's not the human condition, but it is a coping mechanism. Because we're hunters and gatherers, and because we want to fit in and we want to belong, because 200 years ago or whenever we were hunters and gatherers, if we didn't fit in, if we weren't popular, we would be left behind. We wouldn't eat, right? As hunters and gatherers, you wanted to be in the middle of the herd. You wanted to be physically strong enough to defend yourself against most of the people in that herd. Otherwise, you wouldn't get to procreate, right? You couldn't have sex and you couldn't eat. And if you really didn't fit in, they would literally just fucking leave you behind. So we have 10,000 generations whispering in our ear, like, you need to look cool. You need to be accepted. You need to fit in. You need to, get that haircut and get that cologne and buy that fancy watch and drive that fancy car. Like, that's built into our DNA.
But what if you were enough? What if you were enough without it all?
If you're enough without it all, then your life is amazing. And that's one of the goals, is to leave that behind to the best of my ability and engage in oneness and engage. It's interesting that you said that, because I just came off of a whirlwind of travel, and none of it was on my dime. I got invited to 2 insanely amazing vacations, and I was vocal about it. I said, this is not my trip, this is not my jet, none of this shit's mine. I'm an invited guest. As cool as it was, and parts of it were fucking mind-blowing. The pyramids were amazing. In Sardinia, it was somebody's wedding, and there was quite a few people that, you know, I recognized from either the big screen or the sports arena, whatever. As amazing as that was, being at home and spending quality time alone with my cats, feeding the birds in the morning, silly stuff, putting ice. I take a bunch of ice in a pot and I put it into the bird bath every morning. So, you know, it cools down the stone that the water's in, and it gives them cool water because it's 100-something degrees outside. Recently, I don't know if you go to Picnic on First Street, but right around the corner from Picnic, there's this like older dilapidated house, and there's a goat there, and there's a rooster, and they're friends, and they hang out. And I love seeing it. I can't tell you how many times I've stopped and just stared. And I love Austin for this. One of the reasons I love Austin is I can't tell you how many times I've looked in my rearview mirror, and there's not one but 2 cars behind me waiting for me to stop staring at this goat and this rooster. Recently, my girlfriend's out of town. I'm, you know, a little bit like missing her and sad. Recently, I said, fuck it, I'm going to get out. I'm going to go up, and I would just want to like hang out with this goat and this rooster. And I did. And the goat's like looking at me like, where's my treats, motherfucker? You know? And I'm like, oh, wow, am I tripping right now? And he's like looking at me. So I went to, there's that new fancy grocery store, Foxtrot. And I go in, and I'm like, you know, do you guys have like chopped up vegetables or whatever? And like, we have carrots and celery and whatever. So I grabbed a bagel. I don't even know if goats like bagels, but I grabbed a bagel and carrots and celery. And I went back and I shared little pieces of the bagel with the rooster. And I normally wouldn't talk about this because you're supposed to do good deeds and not get caught. But it's relevant to what you're saying because it's a part of being enough. So I'm feeding this goat, and we're having this moment. I mean, this dude is like, I don't know if all goats are like this because I don't know any other goats, but this goat is like, he's looking at me and he's communicating with his eyes, and he's like sizing me up, and he's like kind of thanking me for the carrots and for the celery. He didn't like the celery as much as the carrots. And the rooster's kind of like cackling away at me, and we're having this moment. And I got back in my car after giving them all the carrots and all the stuff. And I was driving home, and I just felt so good. I felt so fucking good. And like, it was so cool to be a part of that moment, to be present in that moment. That rooster didn't care what kind of cologne I had on or what kind of watch I'm wearing, right? And the rooster didn't have cologne on or a watch, and it didn't care what kind of car. I don't know. He did kind of look at my car like it was cool, but that could have been my imagination. But I went home, and I let my girl cat out because my boy will jump the fence. But I let my girl cat out, and she immediately runs over to the outdoor sofa, and she immediately rolls on her back, which means rub my belly. And I sat down next to her, and she's all happy, and she's like twisting back and forth, and I'm rubbing her belly, and I can feel and hear how loudly she's purring. And I'm just sitting there, and I was like in this moment of perfect existence. And you don't need to own a fancy car or wear fancy cologne to have those moments. And in the morning when I drink my coffee and I watch those birds eat the seeds, and I put the almonds out for the squirrels, and I watch the squirrels, and my cat gets to watch, and she gets all wide-eyed and crazy. She doesn't do shit. She lets them just do their thing. But all of that makes me feel like I'm closer to God. and none of the likes and none of the dollar amounts and anything means anything, because I'm in that moment and I'm present and it's beautiful.
Yeah. And I think what's so interesting about you in particular is that you are balancing the two.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, all right, can I live this life of rich and fame?
Mm-hmm.
And can I get not so sucked into it, but also have this peaceful moment? And look, I'm a douchebag for putting this on Instagram, and I'm trying to get likes, but also like I want to spend time with the goats and be one with nature. And it's like, I think a lot of people deal with that struggle of balancing the two.
Yeah.
I don't know if many are as open or as vulnerable or as honest as you are in that pursuit.
They probably haven't bottomed out in the way that I bottomed out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I was in London, I got contacted by this young woman, and she's like, I can't believe you're in my hometown. I would love to meet you. And I remember going to meet her, and like she was all nervous, and I couldn't get over how beautiful she was. I'm like, this girl's she has no idea how insanely beautiful she was. And
that's kind of how I feel about you when you're talking about like being this human being, and then like you're also like, I want to be validated, and I'm like, dude, you're enough.
Yeah.
You really are. Like, you're beautiful the way you are. It's like truly how I feel in my being, and I just want to let you know that.
I appreciate that. And I need that, and I need to hear that. And then I also, as cool as that moment was with that gal, like, you know, I treated her to a couple acai bowls, not that good, but we had an amazing conversation. She was really nervous, which I thought was cute and funny, and I just told her, like, hey, listen, I make smoothies for a living. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't fucking cure cancer, and I didn't, like, you know, invent the electric car or whatever, but, like, seriously, like, it's a privilege for me to spend this time with you. And I went back to the hotel, and I called one of my friends in Malibu, because we have a mutual friend that was passing away, like, in the moment, and he's legitimately famous. I mean, he's like as big as and as famous as it gets, and I love him, and that's not what our friendship is predicated on. Our friendship is predicated on sobriety. But we hadn't talked in a few months, and he's like, hey, what's up? You know, what's up with Taylor? And I was like, oh my God, she's incredible. She's thriving. She's doing so great. And he's like, God, how long is it? 7 years now? I'm like, it's going to be 8 years in October. And she's like, he's like, Kay, he calls me Kay. He's like, Kay, that's amazing. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I didn't know that it could be this good. I didn't know that a relationship could be this good and this intimate and this amazing. And he goes, Kay, I got to be honest with you. Just about everything that is amazing about your relationship comes from her. You need to know that. And it was like a kick in the dick, but it was a sober brother keeping a sober brother humble and present and aware. And he didn't mean it with malice. He loves her. He worships her. He thinks that she's the greatest thing ever, as do I. But he just wanted to make sure that I remembered that, and that I didn't do what I had done so many times in the past, which was fuck up an amazing relationship because I got into ego.
I wanted to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
A previous relationship.
Yeah.
I was listening to you on Rich Roll in 2016.
Yeah.
And you were 3 or 4 months removed from a relationship that you just broken up with your girlfriend of 8 years at that time.
Yeah.
And I thought that the way you did that, or at least the way you spoke about doing that on Rich Roll's podcast, was so remarkable and exactly what I wish I had heard like 2 months ago or 3 months. I was like, wow, that would be the perfect thing for me to hear.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'd love for you to tell that story, and particularly like the breaking up and the difficulty part of it, and the having the difficult conversation, because I think I haven't heard many people speak about breaking up that way, and it was really impactful for me.
Yeah, that was a real pivotal moment in my life, because what I had done with every relationship prior to that was self-sabotage, typically in the form of cheating and then intentionally getting caught. Or just behaving like a complete fucking monster and having them be like, I can't do this anymore. She was not at all in a place of I can't do this anymore. She assumed, like I had assumed the first 7 years of the relationship, that this was it. We were going to be together forever. And we had both just come into money, which also added a whole layer of weirdness. We had never had money. She grew up poor. I grew up, relatively poor, and had certainly gone through extreme poverty in my drinking and my using. So we had just sold a piece of the company, and both of us had more money than we had ever dreamed of having. Cash. Taxes were paid. Money was in the bank. And both of us were unhappy. And she's stubborn and thoughtful and amazing. She's an amazing human being. She will always be one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met in my life. I wouldn't be sitting here now if it weren't for her strength and for her fortitude and for her ability to follow through and take my dreams to fruition. Because I'm a starter. I'm not a finisher. I'm a starter. I am not somebody that follows through with shit. Now I got money, I can hire assistants, and I have, a corporate team Wolverine that does all my shit. But at the time, like, I was just another fucking loser with a bunch of $1 million ideas, which everyone has $1 million ideas. 99% of people will never follow through with them. I was one of those people. She was like, this is what you want to do? Let's go. Let's go to City Hall. Let's make this shit happen. Let's get the proper permits and paperwork and whatever. Let's make it happen. So God bless her. But after about 7 years of being together, building the business together had really sucked the intimacy out of the relationship. And we were nothing more than roommates. We were just roommates. Well, she was my best friend. She was my sister. She was my mom. She was my business partner. She wasn't my girlfriend. And because of my self-awareness through getting and staying sober, I was able to recognize that for some pretty...
How long was it where you realized versus acting on it? It's hard to say because it was a decade ago.
Yeah. Dude, there were months where we were not... I'm just going to say together. I don't want to be graphic and disrespectful, but there were months stacking on top of months. And it's like, I was relatively young, as was she. She's ridiculously beautiful. I fancy myself, somewhat a decent looking guy, and it made no sense. And I just realized, like, this is not helping her. This is not helping me. And rather than be a piece of shit and go act out right now, why don't you just be a man and do the right thing and cut her loose? Because I think she was like 30 or 32 or whatever. Let her go and be with somebody who is obsessed with her and wants to be with her. Not somebody that's going to stick around because she's your business partner or she's your best friend or because she's the greatest girlfriend you've ever had. That's not an excuse to stay with somebody if it's not working anymore. And so she asked a friend of ours if she could go to their concert in New York, and it was a big deal. And I remember she called me from backstage, and she's like, "You're not going to believe this. I was just hanging out with Chris Rock, and I was just hanging out with so-and-so." And I was sitting there like, I'm jealous of, like, the life that she's living. But it let me know that, like, look, she's not helpless. She's going to be cool with or without you. And at that point, I got the courage to go, I gotta put an end to this. And so she came home a couple days later. She walked in the door. I was sitting on my computer, and she started talking, and I just looked up and I said, "I can't do this anymore." And she's like, "Oh, what are you working on?" I'm like, No, I can't do this anymore." And she's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I can't do this anymore. You're my best friend. You're my girlfriend. I mean, you're my best friend. You're my sister. You're my mom. You're my business partner. You're not my girlfriend. And I can't do this anymore. And I'm going to move out." And it was fucking brutal. It was brutal. But it helped that she was in the best financial situation she'd ever experienced in her life. That helped a lot. Thank God we worked hard. And I was able to not leave her high and dry like my father left my mother. And I walked through it with dignity and with grace, as I believe a man is supposed to do. And that doesn't mean that I wasn't depressed afterwards, and that doesn't mean I didn't feel guilty afterwards, and that doesn't mean that for, you know, years afterwards that I didn't like go, fuck, man, that was brutal. And what if she would have done that to you? How would you be handling this? Like, there was a lot of dialogue in my head over it, but ultimately she's thriving now. I mean, she's doing amazing. She's in a great position financially. I'm thriving, and I'm with somebody that, man, I can't wait until Saturday when I get to get on a plane and go see her in Chicago. We were in New York City a week ago seeing my favorite band, and I had, at almost 8 years in, I had the best afternoon with her that I've had since we've met. And I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah, that's special. I mean, what I really want to highlight for you is that, you know, in 2016 when you did that, you were reversing so much of what you had witnessed as a child. So many of the person you were at 30 years old probably could never have done that. 20 years old could never have done that. 10 years, like, you were able to handle that situation at, how old were you in 2016? 8 years ago?
36, 37.
36 or like...
Oh, no, so sorry, 46.
46.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're so young.
Yeah, she was 30, I was 46.
Yeah, so 46 is like the fact that you were able to reverse so much of what I'm sure parents and grandparents and grandparents and grandparents...
Generational.
Generational.
Yeah.
Like, that is like a pivotal moment, I feel, because you didn't cheat. You didn't...
Yeah.
And like, oh my God, like, what does that mean for the world that, like, you can do that? Like, to me, that's the most exciting thing.
Well, listen, it's not just that. It's everything. Because I believe that you are either... listen, you have the ability to very easily fall into the trap of becoming your parents, which most people do.
Yeah.
You also have the ability to become the complete opposite of your parents. In the end, you'll be a combination of both, but hopefully you will have evolved to the point where you are much more the opposite of their bad qualities, and you have absorbed some of their good qualities. You know, my mom was a horrible mother and, you know, didn't protect me and whatever, but my mom fed the birds every day. My mom took care of everybody that she was close with. My mom was a saint in that regard. And my dad, you know, as mean and nasty, he's still alive. I think he's 86, 87 years old. We don't talk. We haven't talked for like a long time, probably 9 years. But as mean and nasty and violent and dark and like whatever my dad was, his strength and his fortitude, like, I was listening to Bill Burr talk about how they grew up and the beatings and the glass of milk in the face and whatever. Like, my dad was so fucking nasty and mean, but when I'm faced with monumental adversity, because I don't have the skill set or the intelligence to figure it out, I just fucking run through it. I run through walls. That's my fucking talent. I run through walls. I don't fucking care. You tell me I can't, and I'll double up my efforts. You tell me it's never going to happen, I'll triple up my efforts. Where that comes from was my father and his strength and his fortitude. Now, I don't lay a hand to women. I don't lay a hand to anybody. I'm fucking 53. Like, for God's sakes, if you're getting into fights and you're over the age of 25, you're a fucking douchebag, and you should probably stop drinking or go see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Sorry, a little bit of judgment there. Maybe we'll take that out. But
I agree with you for
like,
what it's worth.
Yeah, like, we have no business. I mean, you know, when you're in high school or you're in grade school, whatever, yeah, you're gonna have your scraps or whatever. I tried to the best of my ability to take the good qualities of my parents and absorb them and have them, and then I to the best of my ability focus on, you know, my dad was my greatest teacher because he fucked up every relationship he ever had and every business situation he ever had, and he drove all of his friends away. So, like, my dad showed me exactly how not to live life.
It's what Goggins says. He's like, I had a perfect example from my father of what not to do. David Goggins.
Okay. I relate on so many levels, and I love him so much. I love him so much, and my only hope for him, you know, we don't communicate at all, but I hope he dies with a smile on his face. I hope he knows that, you know, regardless of how awful he was at parenting, in a strange way, because he was so awful, I'm able to run through walls. And I look at, you know, Brad, the kid that asked me today, because I was talking about how I always got picked last or second to last for sports teams when I was a kid. There was a kid named Patrick Grigsby who had maybe some sort of cerebral palsy, and you know, back then, this is a horrible thing to say, but you know, the short bus, like he took the short bus to school. Probably an amazing human being, but he had some challenges, and like him and I were always the last to be picked. And he's like, and Brad said, well, what about all the guys that got picked first? Where are they now? I'm like, honestly, man, like, because of Facebook, I actually have an answer for that. And he's like, well, where are they now? I'm like, a lot of them are bald and fat. Many of them are alcoholics. A lot of them have died horrible deaths. Some of them are living lives of mediocrity. Some of them are doing well. But a lot of people that are born and live and stay in their hometown and they never leave and they never go anywhere, they kind of die at 25 years old and they don't get buried until they're 75 years old.
Yeah.
And I never wanted to be that guy.
What do you want to be remembered as?
The guy that succeeded against all odds and made a massive impact on people's lives. I will leave this planet making the people that have helped me build this brand millionaires. And I will create a rehab before I pass, a state-of-the-art facility, 100 beds, maybe Joshua Tree, maybe someplace here in Texas, where people can go to treatment that really need it, and real treatment with like the sauna and the cold tubs and the IVs and the NAD and all the good shit, but for people that can't afford it. I'll do a rehab. There'll be 100 SunLife Organics across the country, around the world as well. And I'll leave a nice legacy. That's what I want to be remembered as, the guy that succeeded against all odds and was able to accomplish all of that. And yeah, that's it.
It's an honor to get the chance and the opportunity to interview you because of not the millions, not the ways in which you have built only yourself, but you've impacted the world and you've increased your own consciousness. And I think if karma is real, you will come back in the next life something greater, because the karma that you were dealt in this life to give you to this moment is like really dark. And I highly recommend people check out the book and go through your story in more detail, because it's a disgusting, you know, that's the only word that really comes to mind, 33 years to live.
Yeah.
And then to be able to find your purpose, find a calling, find a way to help people, that is not something that everyone is capable of doing. And it's why I believe that woman is crying when meeting you, because she is witnessing your ability to increase your own consciousness. And that is so inspirational for people. When you think about increasing your own consciousness, right? What is something you can give someone listening right now to increase their own consciousness, broadly speaking?
I mean, that's an easy one. Ask God for help. That's like the answer to everything. Just ask God for help. I mean, I don't see myself as a very accomplished person. I mean, I got a few bucks in the bank and a nice car and a nice watch and a nice business and a wonderful mate, but I'm not shit compared to a lot of the people that I hang out with. I'm typically the dumbest guy in the room, and I'm happy to be so because I want to learn. But anything that you see in my life that is, I don't know, impressive or cool or whatever, all came from my ego beating the defiance out of me, so much so that I dropped to my knees and I begged God for help. And in the beginning, I begged God for help. And as time went on, I asked God for help. And as time went on after that, I just began to talk to God and just have a conversation and say, you know, like, God, can you be with me right now? God, can you hold my hand right now? God, can you walk me through this difficult time? And yeah, if anybody is struggling with anything, if you ask God for help, help is going to come. It might not come as fast as you want it or in the timing that you want it. It might not come in the form that you want, but help is going to come. God created this. And I'm using the term God loosely. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it's Yahweh or Mohammed or, you know, Zeus or fucking, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, you know, my own personal thing is like whenever I'm in like great crisis, like I go to Jesus and I ask Jesus for help, and then help comes and my life gets amazing again and I forget all about Jesus. So just being honest.
Yeah.
I need to work on my humility and I need to work on my gratitude more. But whatever God you believe in or don't believe in, even if you don't believe, just ask God for help. I promise you help's coming. Just ask God for help. And continue to ask God for help and continue to evolve. Put good stuff inside your head. Read good books. Watch happy movies. Listen to happy music. Listen to classical music, you know? It's been proven that it makes you more intelligent. Like, I want to listen to Joy Division and Sisters of Mercy and Marilyn Manson and all that stuff. And sometimes I do, like when I'm working out, because it'll get me, you know, like rap music will get me through a workout that I don't want to do. But listen to that stuff on a consistent basis and watch enough news, you're going to go to a dark place. You know, go for a walk barefoot in the park and listen to classical music and talk to God. Just go for a walk with God. Do a walking gratitude list. God, thank you for the clean water I get to bathe in. God, thank you for the roof over my head. God, thank you for the breath going in and out of my lungs right now. Thank you for this incredible life that I get to live. Talk to God, ask God, and your life will change in such a profound way, I promise.
To end this podcast, I'll end with a quote from your book that came at the end, which is, "In the end, there is only the straight and narrow. The only thing I ever needed to know was written in the Bible, and that is to love God before all else and love my neighbor as I love myself. That's it. That's the whole truth." Khalil, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Man, thank you. What a beautiful way to end. And that is the truth. And thank you. And thank you all for listening.